Hi guys, and welcome to another video. So Boris Johnson has decided to ease the lockdown. Now the cynics among us would say this is in an attempt to deflect from his chief advisor Dominic Cummings and the shenanigans around his breaking of the lockdown. But let's hear what Boris has to say.
I cannot and will not throw away all the gains we have made together. And so the changes we are making are limited and cautious. It's thanks to the caution we've shown so far that all 5 tests are being met. And that's not my achievement or the government's achievement. It is your achievement. It's only possible thanks to your resolve and dedication to our national purpose to overcome this virus.
Now, I've talked about this before. Boris Johnson is putting the onus on the public. Now, he's singing the praise of the public here, but this could be in an attempt to also blame the public when things go badly. It could also be an attempt to protect the government from a later public inquiry, where they will defend themselves by saying, we did everything we could, but it was the public's fault that things came crashing down.
So, the result is we can move forward with adjusting the lockdown in England on Monday. First, as I set out on Sunday, we will now reopen schools to more children. Closing schools has deprived children of their education, and as so often, it is the most disadvantaged pupils who risk being hardest hit.
Okay, so there's a few things to say about this. First of all, the last part, he said about deprived students. Well, Eton is not going to reopen. Eton will be closed until September. So it's the poorer people who will be forced back into school. Now, he talked about how children need to get an education, and it's important that children get back into school. This is a red herring. This is not. This is once again a distraction. Boris Johnson is not talking about he doesn't care about the education of these children. The parents of these children in many cases, have to return to work. They're no longer able to stay at home because of the lockdown. As the lockdown has been eased, more and more people are going back into work. Now, schools act as a type of childcare. So many parents are having to find an alternative to school, and they can't. So they're saying it's more difficult for me to return to work. So you have to remember, the Tories care more about the economy than they do about public health. So what they're doing here is they're forcing schools to reopen. They don't care about the education. If they cared about education, they would have invested more in education over the last number of years. But the problem here is many parents are being forced back to work. They don't have childcare facilities available. In many cases, they can't afford it. So they need their children to go somewhere. So this is why schools are reopening. There's no real advantage to the children's education to send them back into school for about a month. We're almost into the month of June now. The schools open, and then they'll close pretty soon after that. You know, children have to go back into school. They have to readjust. They've been out of school for a period of time. They need to readjust. And to what advantage? The schools will close. They'll go on their summer holidays. Wouldn't it make more sense to reopen the schools in September? Now, the UK is not alone here. There are other countries around Europe doing the same thing. But I think it's a bad policy. But I understand the reasoning behind it. It's because parents have to go back to work, and the government don't have the means to provide some sort of alternative. So the idea is reopen the schools. But Boris should have been honest about this and said, we're opening the schools because parents have nowhere to send their children.
On Monday, we will start to put this right in a safe way by reopening nurseries and other early years settings and reception year 1 and year 6 in primary schools. A fortnight later, on the 15th of June, secondary schools will begin to provide some face-to-face contact time for years 10 and 12. Second, we will also start to reopen shops as we restart our economy. And we'll begin on Monday with outdoor retail and car showrooms where social distancing is generally easier.
And I agree with this. I think this is a good policy. So outdoor stores where people can maintain social distancing, and for example, car showrooms where you have small numbers of people. You know, car showrooms don't normally fill up with people, especially at this time of the year. So this is a reasonable policy, and I'm not criticizing him for this. This is a good policy. It's you will eventually have to adapt to the situation and open certain businesses in a gradual way. So this does make sense.
And a fortnight later, on the 15th of June, we intend to reopen other non-essential retail, but only provided the 5 tests are still being met and shops have been made COVID secure.
Now, I don't know what he means by COVID secure, but in Italy, what COVID secure generally means is that when you enter a store, you either wear gloves or there is hand sanitizer available just outside the door or just inside the door of the store. So you have the chance to sanitize your hands, or of course you wear gloves and you don't have to sanitize your hands. And you wear a mask and you maintain social distancing within the store. So this is COVID compliant. Also, you have markings on the floor to make sure that people maintain a certain amount of distance, and that you have, for example, much more open space. So if you had a bar or restaurant or something like that, that you have fewer tables so that people are able to sit down, but they are able to maintain the necessary distance. And of course that there are checks carried out for this, so that you have the Department of Health, or you have the local police, or someone is going around from business to business that deal with the public, making sure that they are following these rules.
Lastly, I know the toll that lockdown has taken on families and friends who've been unable to see each other.
Except Dominic Cummings.
So from Monday, we will allow up to 6 people to meet outside, provided those from different households continue strictly to observe social distancing rules by staying 2 meters apart. At the moment, as you know, people can meet in parks, but not in private gardens. And this was a cautious first step. But we know that there is no difference in the health risk. So we will now allow people to meet in gardens and other private outdoor spaces.
I understand this, but the problem I've seen is online. I've seen pictures. Now, of course, online pictures don't represent the entire country, but I've seen pictures of people in the UK filling up parks. So they're not respecting social distancing completely in parks. And you're also now opening up gardens, but you're going to reduce the possibility of maintaining social distancing in gardens. Of course, it depends on the size of the garden, but if people have a standard small back garden from their homes, I don't even know what I'm saying by saying standard. There is no standard. So I don't know if it's a good idea to reopen gardens, for example, private gardens. I would maintain it as people can use their gardens, but they must be people living in the home. This will encourage parties and this will encourage barbecues, and I don't think it's a good idea at this stage. I understand summer is arriving and people want to enjoy themselves, but I think what you're going to start to see is parties taking place in people's gardens. Parents will start to have children's parties in gardens, and I think this is going to create problems. But I'm not an expert, of course, so I don't know if my criticism is legitimate.
These changes mean that friends and family can start to meet their loved ones, perhaps seeing both parents at once or both grandparents at once. And I know that for many people this will be a long-awaited and joyful moment. But I must stress that to control the virus, everyone needs to stay alert, act responsibly, strictly observe social distancing rules, and stay 2 meters apart from those you do not live with.
Notice how he went quickly past stay alert, and then do everything else. Okay, but this stay alert means nothing. Stay alert towards other people, stay alert towards the virus, stay alert towards what?
Minimizing contact with others is still the best way to prevent transmission. You should also try to avoid seeing people from too many households in quick succession so that we can avoid the risk of quick transmission from lots of different families and continue to control the virus. And it remains the case that people should not be inside the homes of their friends and families, not inside the homes of your friends and families, unless it is to access the garden, to get to the garden. I should add that at this stage,
but I think this is going to create confusion. You can say you can get to the garden, you can pass through the home, but then people will spend time in the home and then they will move into the garden, or they will stay in the garden and then it will rain and then everyone will move inside the home. I think this garden idea is going to create a lot of problems. It will be confusing, but it will also, I think, facilitate in the spread of the virus.
I'm afraid that those who have been asked to shield themselves should continue to do so. And I want to say to those extremely clinically vulnerable people who are now being shielded that I do understand how difficult this has been for you especially. And I want to thank you for all the efforts you have gone to, because your actions have helped the NHS to cope. We're looking carefully at how we can make your life easier and how we can better support you, and we want to say more on that soon.
Now, once again, maybe I'm being too cynical, but is this part of the herd immunity process? So these people who are shielded, or they will stay in their homes, but the rest of the population will mix and the spread of the virus will increase. But maybe I'm being too cynical.
I want to reassure everyone that we can make all of the changes I have outlined in a safe way. We know that children, and particularly young children, are much less likely to be seriously affected by the virus. We know that if shops enforce social distancing, as required by our COVID secure guidelines, then the virus is less likely to spread.
Yeah, on the second one, yes. On the first one, this thing about children are less likely to show symptoms, less likely to suffer the consequences of it. But putting a lot of children back into school for economic reasons is not a good idea if you're attempting to defeat a virus, because this is what the schools are opening for. They're not opening to fight the virus. They're not opening because you care about education. You're opening schools because children have to go somewhere. They can't stay at home, and parents are being forced back to work.
And crucially, we know that transmission of the virus is far lower outdoors, so we can confidently allow more interaction outside. I understand that people will have questions as to how to do all of this safely, and we will publish guidance on these changes to help people, to help you make the most of them. Now, I know inevitably that there may be some anomalies or apparent inconsistencies in these rules, and clearly what we're proposing is still just a fraction of the social interaction each of us would normally enjoy.
There is always this fight, this struggle between the scientists and the politicians. The scientists would say, don't open gardens. Don't allow people to congregate in gardens. I don't believe the scientists would support this. They would be against the idea of letting gardens reopen. But the politicians on the other side are, we need to ease this lockdown or people are going to get very angry with us. So who's winning this battle? I think it'd be much better for the public if the sage advice was published by the government. The advice given by the scientists to the government, if this was published. Because then the public can look at the science and understand what they need to do. But once again, there's this struggle between the scientists who want to protect the public and the politicians, the government, who want to reopen the economy.
I know many of you will find this frustrating, and I'm sorry about that. But I'm afraid that is unavoidable, given the nature of the invisible enemy that we are fighting. It's a complex problem, and we're asking for everyone's patience as we work through it together.
Working through it together, but once again, I hate to go over this topic once again, but once again, Dominic Cummings undermined public health, undermined confidence in the government in this lockdown. Now, we can argue back and forth whether Dominic Cummings broke the rules. I believe he did. Other people say he didn't. But we have to agree that he has undermined public confidence in the rules. He hasn't strengthened public confidence in the rules. I really don't believe anyone can argue that point. Whether he broke them or not, you have to agree with me that he has undermined public confidence. For that reason, he should be sacked. And this is either this is an attempt to distract from that, or it's an attempt to damage control.
We will inevitably not get everything right first time. But I must ask everyone to remember that it's the same patience, the same hard work and sacrifices of the British people in lockdown that have got us so far and allowed us to make the progress that we have.
We don't get everything right first time. Who, Boris? Who are you talking about doesn't get everything right first time? Are you talking about the public or are you talking about the government? You notice he didn't say who we are. We don't all get it right first time. Is this an attempt to mix Dominic Cummings in with the public? No, you can't do that. Dominic Cummings is not a member of the public. Dominic Cummings is very much not a member of the public. So when Dominic Cummings does something stupid, it's very much different than an average person on the street doing something stupid.
By protecting the NHS, getting us through the peak and getting this virus under control, we are able to deliver all of the adjustments and easing of restrictions I have set out today. These adjustments are most of those we set out to achieve in step 2 of our roadmap, and we have also been able to have them in place by June the 1st, as we had hoped. And there's no doubt that we're making progress, and I'm hopeful that in the coming weeks we may be able to do more. Because obviously, while protecting the health and safety of the public is and must always be our number one priority.
It's not your priority. Protecting the government is your number one priority. Sorry if I'm sounding cynical, but that's the reality. It has always been about protecting the government. It will always be about protecting the government, not the public. It's never about protecting the public. It's about protecting the government. Now, if the public get protected as collateral of that, collateral damage to that endeavour, then that's probably good. But you must remember, it's always about protecting the government, not the public.
We must also work to restart our economy and society so as many people as possible can begin returning to their way of life.
No, I think he should have said we're moving into a new normal. We can't return to normality. Maybe he's just saying return to some form of normality. But I think he needs to be more honest with people and say, look, what we're going to see over the next year is not going to be what we had before. We're going into a new world. I think you need to prepare people for this. Many people are under the impression that the lockdown will gradually fall away, will gradually be eased, and then we'll go back to the way things were before. But we will not. And you need to be honest with the public by saying that we're not going back to the way things were before. We may eventually return to something closer to that, but we're not going back to that. I want to make a parallel with airport security. You know, before 2001, airport security was extremely lax. Now we're never going back to the type of airport security that we had back in the 1990s. Unfortunately, you know, it was much more easy. There was none of this checks and controls and taking off your shoes and all of this sort of business. But in the same way, we're going into a new normality, and I think politicians need to be more honest with the public over this.
But I want to reaffirm that fundamental commitment to the British people that all the steps we have taken and will take are conditional. They are conditional on all the data and all the scientific advice. And it is that scientific advice which will help us to judge what we are doing is safe. And
why won't you publish this scientific advice? What have you to lose by publishing this scientific advice? Really, I don't understand why you're adamant about not publishing this scientific advice. Why are you so secretive? It's not like this is information that would damage national security. This would encourage people to follow the steps because they would see what would really be necessary for them to do. But this opaqueness, I think, is also undermining public confidence.
And I have to warn you, in all frankness, as we go forwards, that there will be further local outbreaks. So we will monitor what is going on very carefully. We will put on the brakes as required, and where necessary, we will reimpose measures. And it's very important to be clear about that.
I hope he's been honest here, but my problem is that I don't trust Boris Johnson anymore. If you had asked me, if Boris Johnson had said something like this a number of years ago, he said we're going to reimpose measures, then I would trust him. But I don't know whether Boris Johnson will reimpose measures. He's saying it, but is it an empty threat? Is it just to sound tough? I don't know. And that's quite damning, I think. Let me know in the comments, guys, what you think. How do you feel about these measures? Do you think they go too far? Do you think they go far enough? Do you have any issues about some of the things he had said? As always, your comments are much appreciated. Thanks. Why not become a Patreon and enjoy access to our Discord server where we share news, chat, and have some fun? If you become a patron, you can also make video suggestions on topics that are important to you. Check it out via the link in the description.